Hello MYFAROG enthusiasts. In the past few days I've been in contact with some of the new members in the Mythic Fantasy role-playing gamers group run by William Roberts and Jeff Cape, and they've talked to me about some of the problems they've had when it comes to character creation and working out some other things. So I would like to talk about some of those issues in this video, hopefully to try and clear them up for other new MYFAROG players. So essentially this video is for people who are new to MYFAROG and even new to role-playing in general. So the first thing I would like to talk about is adding racial modifications to your starting attributes and working out your modification for each attribute. Secondly, I'll talk about the skills you can pick due to your birthplace or your cultural background, and what happens to those when they're replaced by character role skills. Thirdly, I would like to talk about the OV and DV of weapons and shields and the effect of dual wielding. Fourthly, I'd like to talk about a realistic idea of the gear you might need to purchase at the beginning for your character in order to survive for a number of days. Then I would like to talk about a little bit about encumbrance and what happens if you have a backpack and a shield, and if you'd like to put the shield on your back. And then I would like to talk a little bit about dodge bonus and how to work that out, because it's changed a little bit in MYFAROG version 2.6. So in this video I've created a Wood Elf male character, as you can see down here. This is the Wood Elf here on page 8. So a Wood Elf male starts with a +3 racial modification to charisma, a -1 to constitution, a +2 to dexterity, a +1 to intelligence, -3 to strength, and a +1 to will. So physically they have some disadvantages over other races in the game, but they also have some nice bonuses, as you can see, such as charisma and dexterity. Alright, so earlier on I rolled the attributes for my Wood Elf character, and remember in MYFAROG you roll 3d6 twice, so it's one roll per parent, so one for your father and one for the mother, and then you choose the highest roll, and then you take into account the racial modification. So it could either be a positive or a negative. Alright, so this is what I roll on the dice here, and in brackets you can see the racial modification. So charisma, I got a 17, and you get a +3, so this will be a 20. Constitution, I got a 12 on the dice, -1. That will give me an 11. Dexterity, 14, +2, that makes it 16. Intelligence, 11 +1, 12. Strength, 14, -3, takes it down to 11. Will, 15 +1, takes it to 16. So that's what my attributes look like for my Wood Elf. Charisma 20, Constitution 11, Dexterity 16, Intelligence 12, Strength 11, Will 16. Then on page 9 you can work out you can see here the value and the modification for each attribute. So my character has 20 in Charisma, that will give him a +4 to his Charisma modification for any skill checks. Constitution, I have 11, that just gives me a +0. Dexterity, I have 16, that will give me a +2. Intelligence, has 12, so that's just a plus 0. Strength 11, again that's a plus 0. And will 16 gives me a plus 2, as you can see here. So all in all, pretty good starting attributes. And by looking at these attributes, I could get an idea of the type of a character I'd like to play in MYFAROG. Just to point out that Wood Elf is not only a race, but it's also a class as well. So if you're playing a Wood Elf, you cannot choose to be, say, a warrior or a berserker class. You're just simply a Wood Elf. One of the actual nice things about Wood Elves is that they start with 14 character role skills, which is pretty impressive compared to some of the other classes in MYFAROG. For example, a warrior only starts with 6, trickster has 7, sorcerer has 8, ranger 11, a berserker or valkyrie has 7, a bard 11, and bacchante or main starts with 9 character role skills. If you choose to play civilian, then they start with 4 character role skills of your choice. So you could, for example, if you wanted to go, you could go for, say, melee, missile, navigation and poetry. So actually playing civilian can be quite interesting and a little bit different, because you can mold the character in any way that you'd like, although they do start with only 4 character role skills, so they are somewhat limited, as you might expect. Okay, so that's it for the attributes and racial modification. Here you can see the modifications to each attribute here in lowercase. In uppercase, that refers to the actual attribute. So charisma 17, con 12, lowercase CHA plus 4. So for any skill check using charisma, my Wood Elf will get a plus 4, which is pretty handy, in fact. So for example, if I wanted my Wood Elf to perform a skill check such as acting, perhaps to tell a convincing lie, then he would gain a plus 4 to that straight away. Okay. Secondly, now let's talk a little bit about the cultural background of your character, which is on page 13. As you can see here, the Wood Elves, they either start in Avalon, which is the mythical island far to the west of Thule, or they can either be from one of the regions in Thule. So normally you roll a d20 for each starting character to determine where they come from. If you're rolling your character playing by the book, as you probably should. Okay. So, for example, my Wood Elf, let's say he's from Avalon, he can choose 2 of these 3 skills as trained skills. So we have melee, navigation and seamanship. Okay, so if we go back to page 21 now, I can have a look at my Wood Elf's character role skills. For example, melee is not one of the character role skills. Navigation, Wood Elves don't have navigation as a character role skill either, and neither do they have seamanship. So that's actually quite good for my character. I could, for example, choose to have melee and navigation. So I would start with 2 trained skills, and then I would have 14 character role skills for being a Wood Elf. Okay. There might be some situations in which, for example, you might be from the region of Erulia or Scudia, and if you have a warrior, let's say, then those regions are perhaps not the best to be a warrior, because two of the three train skills here are what a warrior already has as character role skills. So, for example, from Erulia, you can either choose melee, poetry or riding. So a warrior starts with melee and riding as a character role skill. So in actual fact here, my warrior would only gain one train skill, which would be poetry. Here in Scudia, again you have missile and riding, so my warrior would gain stealth as a trained skill. If my warrior came from Agadir, I would be able to choose healing, navigation or world lore, none of which are character role skills for a warrior. So I'd be able to choose two of these three skills as trained skills. So I would probably take healing and either navigation or world lore. Most likely navigation, but again that's up to you. Okay, so hopefully that clears that up a little bit. Okay, so next we'll have a look at some of the melee weapons and shields, which you can find on page 49. So essentially weapons in MYFAROG will not give you an advantage in terms of defensive value. Yeah, most of them do not, in fact. A lot of the weapons actually give you a negative to your defensive value simply because they're not very good weapons to defend yourself with. For example, a flail. Defending yourself with a flail is not ideal. There are some weapons, for example, say a staff, as you can see, that gives you a +1 to your DV, or a war scythe. So those are particularly long weapons, spear class weapons, which give you a bit of more of an advantage if in terms of defensive properties. So most of the weapons do not give you a defensive value or a positive defensive value. In fact, being unarmed gives you a -5 to your defensive value. Battle glove gives you a -4 to your defensive value, etc. If your character chooses to dual wield, for example, if let's say my wood elf takes 2 hammers, so I've got a hammer in each hand, that will give me a +1 to my melee offensive value when it comes to working that out. So we'll have a look at that in a second. Let's go back a page, or forward rather, and here we can see the shields. Okay, so we have at the bottom wicker going all the way to the top to a deeply dished shield. Okay, so let's work out the melee OV and melee DV for my wood elf character now. So he's dual wielding, he's got 2 hammers, and a hammer gives you a -2 to your DV. So we only use that once, we don't double it to -4. Say if my character had a hammer and a short seax in the other hand, the seax actually gives you a -3 to your DV, the hammer gives you a -2 to your DV, so I will just use the -2 from the hammer. Dual wielding gives you a +1 to your OV, so we'll work out what my character has now. Okay, so let's say my character is from Avalon. He's got melee as a trained skill, so if he didn't have that melee as a trained or character role skill, he would get a -2. So I'm just at I'm still at 0 at the moment. Let's say there's no encumbrance mod, no fatigue mod, Weapon mod, if any, nothing there. +1 if carrying a shield or one weapon in each hand. So I've got a weapon in each hand, so that gives me a +1. And other melee mods. Well, my character has a +0 to his strength mod. So in the end, my character, my Wood Elf, has a +1 to his melee offensive value. Let's work out his defensive value for melee. Starts at 10. Melee skill proficiency, it's 0, so I'm still at 10. I don't have a shield. No encumbrance mod. No fatigue mod. Weapon mod, if any. That's what we need to look at now. I've got a -2 from the hammers. So that will give me, and any other melee mods, well, I've got a +0 for the strength. So that will give my character a melee DV of +8, which is actually pretty low. So I wouldn't really want to get my Wood Elf into combat unless I really had to. Alright, we'll forget missile, OV and DV for the moment. We'll come to that in a second. Let's have a look at the dodge. So dodge is always a +1. It can never go below a +1 unless there are certain circumstances. So I've automatically got a +1. I have a +2 Dex modifier. So the way dodge works is that you halve the Dex modifier, rounding down. So I've got a +2, let's halve that, so that will give me a 1, plus the 1 you get for dodging. So my Wood Elf will have a +2 dodge. So in order to get a +3, then I would either need to have some kind of a talent, such as good reflexes, which gives you a +1 for working out dodge from your Dex modifier. So I'd need to have a Dex modifier of +4 in order to increase my dodge to +3. So that's something which has changed quite a lot in MYFAROG 2.6. So it's actually rather hard now to get a really high dodge value. I think in one game in the past, in previous version of MYFAROG, I had a character who had a dodge value of +5 or 6. And already, you know, if your character has a really good shield DV, then that's going to make your character pretty hard to hit in melee. Of course, there are some situations in which you can't use your dodge bonus if you're in a confined space. Let's say you're on a rope bridge, a very narrow rope bridge between a chasm, and you would not be able to have your dodge bonus. Also, if you're fast asleep, if you're unaware of an attack, like a sneak attack, then you would not have that dodge bonus. Okay, so now I'm going to work out the MI, OV and DV for my Wood Elf now, and let's say that he's going to take 3 weighted darts. Okay, so as you can see, there's nothing, no negatives or positives for DV or OV, so that's pretty straightforward. So let's work out my MI, OV. So missile skill proficiency, I'm untrained, so I get a negative. Actually, I'm not, sorry, I have it as a Wood Elves have missile as a character role skill. So that will just be a 0 because I'm a level 1 character. No encumbrance mod, no fatigue mod. I don't have a helmet. Weapon mod, there's nothing there. So now we'll look at my dexterity mod. And that's a +2, so I will get a +2 to my MIOV. MIDV value starts with a 10, do not have a shield, size So my character is a size 0, so again there's nothing there. Other missile mods, so that's just going to be a straight out +10 and a +2 if I can dodge, so which will make it a 12. Okay, so now let's have a look at a realistic idea of gear you might need to purchase at the beginning for your character. So we can see here we've got equipment and tools on page 67, and on page 69 you've got food and drink. So normally for my characters I try to take some bandages. Yeah, they're pretty light and cheap, they only cost 1 copper each and they weigh in at 4 ounces, so I would typically take perhaps 4 or 5 of those. You never know when you or one of your companions might need a bandage if they get a cut wound. Next I would take something to start a fire with, so either a bow drill or something like a tinderbox. So it's always a good idea to have something to start a fire with. Then I would take something to give you light, such as a candle. You could even have a torch. You could have something like a lantern as well. Yeah, so all of these come in at different weights and costs, and the amount of feet they radiate light, or illuminate light I should say. So those are some of the basics in terms of equipment and tools. Again, another good one here is a water skin or a bottle. Comes in it empty. In Thule it's rather easy to find sources of water, so you should be able to find that if you're foraging, or if you're with a character who is especially good at foraging, so it shouldn't be too hard to find water. I mean, again, that will depend a little bit on the time of year. And a lot of these other tools and pieces of equipment you might want to have a look at depending on your character role. Food and drink. Again, it's probably a good idea to take enough to last you at least 2 or 3 days. So I normally take, for example, field rations weighing at £1. They cost 12 copper. And the thing here to remember is that a pound of food qualifies as a day ration. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Again, in Thule, you can forage around looking for food. You might even come across some game type animals such as rabbits, hares and deers to find you a nice meal. The next thing I wanted to talk about is what happens if your character has a backpack and if you're carrying a shield at the same time. You might come into a situation where you might be on the run, say from some Arby's or Commissions, and you might need to climb a cliff or some kind of a rock face. If you didn't have a backpack on your bag, if you had enough time you could attach the shield to your back. But having a backpack on your shield already means that you can't put the shield onto your back. So the only option here would be to drop the shield, drop the backpack and put the shield on your back, or try and climb the rock face of the cliff with a shield in one hand, which is a little bit risky. Let's say you'd get a negative, I think, 2 to any climbing skill checks. It's not impossible, but not advisable. But you might get away with it, so that's something to consider. In the world of Thule, in all of the villages, towns, settlements, etc., if you come across one on your travels, you're not going to find, say, a tavern, such as, say, the Prancing Pony in the town of Bree in Middle Earth. where you can find a bed for a night and get some food and drink. Those kind of things don't exist in Thule. Typically you can find beds in temples if the settlement, village or town has a temple. Then you should be able to find a bed in a temple for the night. Failing that, you can try to convince one of the inhabitants of the settlement, village or town to let you stay in their house for the night, to put you up. So an act of hospitality. If you are the guest, then you would be required to give your host something, a gift, an item. If you don't have one, then the host will give you a gift in return, and you'll be able to spend one night in that person's home as an act of generosity and hospitality. They might not put you up for the night for whatever reasons. That will all come down to things like social skills. And again, if you wanted to spend a couple of nights in the settlement, village or town, then the following night, then you could try with another person to see if they will put you up for the night. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So I hope you found this video useful. If you've got any questions or comments, then please put them in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. And check out the group on Facebook, Mythic Fantasy Role Playing Gamers Group. We've got lots of games happening all the time on platforms such as Google Hangouts. It's a really good group of guys and girls in the group, and hopefully we'll see you in one of the games coming up soon. Okay, until the next time, bye bye.
Lights in the lake, flickering